can have your eyes closed while you're listening to us, but we still hope you hear everything. I'm Charlie.
And I'm Cory.
And this week we will be discussing Ed Sheeran's brand new album, Subtract, as part of our Folklore Month. This was a natural choice for us to do because the album is produced by Aaron Dessner, who produced Folklore, most of it. And it was actually Taylor Swift who introduced Aaron and Ed Sheeran and thought they should work together. So this album would not exist without Folklore, period.
Wow, I did not realize that. That's amazing.
Yep, that is what has been said. And so, here we are, brand new, our second ever brand new release we've done. I kind of like doing brand new releases. It gives us a chance to go in, no preconceived notions, fresh look at it all.
It really does. And this one, just like our last one, we got a bunch of different aids to help us out as well. And that is something we always love, period. You guys hear us saying it all the time, but this one had some cool things to go along with it.
Yeah, he's definitely been doing a promo cycle for the album. He has a whole small docu-series on Disney Plus. I don't know if you watched, I watched his Apple Music interview with Zane Lowe.
That one I didn't get to see.
I did get to see that, and that had some interesting insight as well that I want to discuss. And also, this I just found out like 2 days after the album came out. This is a visual album. And who knew Ed Sheeran would drop a visual album, particularly for the album produced by Aaron Dessner? This made it pretty clear from the beginning, this was not going to be a pop album from Ed Sheeran. That much was clear once it was announced he was working with Dessner, and that intrigued me, being such a fan of Folklore and Evermore from Taylor. So I was like, oh, that's interesting. Because for me, Ed Sheeran, he's definitely been one of the biggest stars of now this past decade in music. And he's someone I've never considered myself to be a huge fan of. He's had songs that I've liked. He's also had some songs that I really didn't like. So I've only ever heard one of his albums all the way through, and I thought it was just okay. I thought most of it was pretty forgettable, but this one intrigued me from the beginning.
I'm with you as far as an Ed Sheeran. I was never a mega fan, a super fan. I was never really even a fan. I was a fan of him as an artist in the fact of I enjoy seeing any single artist being able to take life by the horns and get out there. So I always liked that about him. He always had a confidence, but I was never super crazy for his music. I just dug his confidence. I dug his stage presence. You know, back in the early days when he used to do like Pony by Genuine or like other crazy little rap ditties, I always thought that was cool. And I have a soft spot, or actually, no, I applaud the artists that can get everyone's ear. And he always struck me as one of those artists who could at least get everyone to listen once.
Yeah, he definitely can do that. That is for sure. And I mean, many have pointed out he really doesn't look like a pop star. He's not the first person you'd think this guy's like the teen heartthrob. He's just not the first one you'd think of, but he definitely has the savvy and chops to do it. And I think the savvy is very key. I will say that here because like in his interviews and all, he just says like, I just write music I like. And I do believe that.
Me too.
But you don't get to that level of success by just doing that. You have to be smart. You have to know your industry. You have to follow the trends and see what you're doing. And I kind of, with this album, I really do feel like this is very different. It's not a pop album in the way you'd expect from him, but I do think that he saw that this kind of indie pop folk music can be commercially successful with Taylor. And I think he's seen now, oh, I can do it and be successful. This is a time for me to do it. And he even acknowledged in his Apple Music interview that some of his more recent music wasn't quite as well received by everybody. He admitted a lot of people hated his first single off his last album, Bad Habits. And it was a hit, but a lot of people didn't like it. And the whole album was just kind of met with a pretty mixed reception. A lot of people really didn't care. So this seemed like a pretty clear time to, I guess, change gears. And he even said, like, I had this whole math thing planned out, and Subtract was going to be where I took it all away from what I was doing after Equals, which I didn't hear all of, but he said that was all of it put together. But this is me stripping it back. So I think that he's very conscious of what he is doing when it comes to putting out these albums. And he definitely considers how people are going to respond to that.
He does. I'll even go out on a limb and say that even though he is a very planned out man, and we see that a lot in the documentary, getting to see the testimonials of his wife and people around him, he is very talking things into reality and planned out. But even that being said, I'll go out on a limb and say that he needed this album. This album, he needed it. It fell right in the perfect time of his life. In fact, now that I think about it, the Disney docuseries starts out with him laughing with the crew / interviewer, whoever, and being like, when you called me, I was like, let's do this documentary. And we were like, oh, we're going to shoot me in the studio making an album. Ha ha ha. And that's not necessarily what happened. And that's the truth. But I think this album he definitely needed inside of all that turmoil, all that life, not turmoil, all that life.
Yes. And as we said, as planned out as he may have been, sometimes, yet life does happen, and there are things that you do not plan for. And that is a big point that has been addressed in his press cycle for this album, and frankly, the songs on the album itself. So he lost a couple of good friends, one being a man named Jamal Edwards, who he considered his best friend and who he said he just wouldn't have a career without, because he helped really promote his music early on and got him to where he got to be. And he died in February of last year from a drug overdose, sadly, it appears. And not long before or after it, one of the two, his pregnant wife was diagnosed with a tumor, and they said, well, we can't treat it until after the baby's born. So that was a real 1-2 punch for Ed Sheeran, clearly. And it reflected in his writing, because anybody, if you're a songwriter, you're going to write songs about that. That's what you're going to do when those big, crazy things happen in your life. Of
course.
And that's what he did. And with Aaron Dessner, he just found the right person to go through to it. But what was different for him was, and this is how Dessner works, he sends completed tracks to his band, The National, for their lead singer to write lyrics. And he did the same thing with Taylor, and he did the same thing with Ed. And Ed, with these completed instrumentals, he just knocked out songs. He said he had 7 songs written in 2.5 hours.
Yeah. Yeah. His wife was like, he went downstairs and just went nuts and did 7 songs.
Yeah. And that was a big change from before, because he even said, like, in his Apple Music interview with Zane Lowe, oh, when we did Bad Habits, we spent like 4 hours trying to get the first verse right. So, and this one, he even said, like, in the past for my albums, I've like at times really had a long time to think about what I'm gonna put on it. This time, I just put what I wrote for this era. I just put on these new songs that I wrote. He says he wrote 30 songs with Dessner, and with the exception of one, that's what pretty much all we hear here. He just puts on mostly newly written material, except for one song.
And that being said, the crazy part, or the flip side on that, is he also said this is the first time that he's ever put anything out that he didn't know was going to be a banger. Like, he alludes to, like, every time I had a number one, I knew that was going to be a number one. Like, I knew it. I had it. It was written already, done, not as far as the song be written, but he knew that. And this one, he said, I don't know. And then he finished the Disney documentary off with saying, and I don't care. I really don't. Like, and he said, I might get crap for saying that, going back here and over there, but here's the real, like, he didn't say I needed it, but he needed this album and he put it out, and he really doesn't. I believe he doesn't care.
Oh, I
He
do
hopes,
too.
because he's that artist, he says it in the docu-series, like, you don't get into the game not caring what people thought. If I was an artist who didn't care what people thought, I wouldn't release it, is were his words. And he hopes that everybody has a great time, but he doesn't care on this one, and I
Yeah.
believe that.
Yeah, I do too. I believe it's a work that he felt he had to put out. He really wanted to put all these feelings out with all the tumultuous events in his life this past year or so, and he put it to record. And that's what he did. And yeah, and it's the Subtract is correct. This is definitely a return to his early folk sound that we heard when he first broke out with the A Team, which was like not recently, that was over a decade ago now, because he went into the pop realm pretty quickly after that. He started going into the pop realm, but this is not that. He's just back to how he started as the folk singer songwriter, and just back to basics. And so it's not in that regard quite as drastic of a reinvention as Folklore was for Taylor Swift, because that wasn't like she returned to doing country music. It was a new sound for her. This isn't an entirely new sound for him, but it is framed by a new perspective. And I think that makes it an interesting album to discuss. The numbers for it aren't in yet. The first week numbers aren't in. I'll be curious to see how it does. But the critical reviews have been mostly positive. Quite a few are saying it's easily his best album ever.
Do you think, and I won't comment on that. We'll comment on that towards the end, but do you think those numbers will be affected by it being a visual album? Because I would think that once the populace understands that it's a visual album, that they would watch it there rather than listen to it on Spotify. Do you
Well,
think that will be the case?
I think it's going to help automatically because that all counts for it.
Oh,
YouTube,
really? Okay.
Spotify.
Heard that.
And
I didn't even
so
think.
there's automatically going to be new numbers in either way. Yeah, none of the songs have gotten to 100 million yet. The most any of them, the lead singles gotten like 87 million range. And that's not bad for a new song. Don't get me wrong. A lot of people would kill for that, but his biggest numbers, he has songs in the billions, this guy.
Yeah, and the rest of this album fails in comparison number wise. I know it's early and we're not going to get hung up on it, but if you look just on the Spotify numbers alone, it's pretty drastic.
Yeah, and it does make me wonder a bit. My main because the way things are now, Morgan Wallen's been at the top of the album charts for 2 months now because he put out a triple album, and that just clogs everything up. And so it does sound like this might actually be Ed's first album to miss the top spot since his debut in the US,
Wow.
which is pretty crazy and well, not well deserved, frankly. I would say. I mean, like, okay, I'm gonna say it now. The album with Shape of You is gonna get was at number one, but this probably won't be. That's just not right in my opinion. I know that's a pop song, but like it's just not right in my opinion.
Even though I agree with you, I'll play devil's advocate. Do you think there's songs on here that can really do a number one run?
Number one, I'm not so sure, but I
Yeah.
think we'll get into it. I think there's a couple that could do okay because he hasn't some of those pop instincts. I still hear some of it in this album.
Oh yeah. Oh
I
yeah.
definitely still hear some of it in this album. Like I definitely still can hear that this is an Ed Sheeran album, even if it's different for him. But with that being said, I'm ready to dive into this track by track like we do.
Yeah, let's do this.
But I do want to note that for the visual album, it starts with an intro where Ed is driving off a cliff into the ocean. And that's kind of a motif throughout the visual album of this. So I don't know if I'm going to mention the video for all of the songs, but I will for at least some of them because I think it adds to it in certain cases for sure.
It definitely does. We started to have the conversation before, and it's going to be a subject that we'll search throughout. And the question that that rose between us was, is the album the same just listening to it or watching and listening to it? So I'm interested to hear as we go through.
So am I. So with that being said, let's now get started with our first track, which is
Inspired by the life of the savvy and ambitious Colombian businesswoman Griselda Blanco comes a new Netflix original limited series. Griselda tells the story of a devoted mother who, with her lethal blend of charm and relentless savagery, creates one of the most powerful cartels in history. Witness Sofia Vergara's captivating transformation into the godmother of the underworld. Griselda, streaming January 25th, only on Netflix.
Bo. Ed Sheeran said that this song serves as a metaphor for depression when you feel really low, can't seem to break the cycle, but it also shows that, like, it does have a message of resilience by saying the waves won't break my boat. Like, I'm still going to keep going, even though this is hard. And I definitely still hear that classic Sheeran chorus here. I'm not sure this would be a huge hit, but it's definitely got a hook to it, this song.
It does have a hook to it. The resilience, when you look at him, and you spoke to this earlier, but when you look at him, he's got a softer look. He's not your typical pop star. Through the docuseries, I really come to respect his resilience and his strength in an old school manly type of way. And I'll come right out and say it. I didn't expect that from him. I expected a more soft approach to life from him. And that was my fault because I judged just by his looks on that. He's a pretty tough guy.
I mean, his music could have told you that, to be fair. I mean, this is the guy who wrote Thinking Out Loud, for fuck's sake. I mean...
Oh, yeah, that's too. But I mean, I'll go back to me not knowing who he was, just knowing a picture in my head of who he was as an artist. You can write tough all you want, but when I see it in the docuseries and I see the way he handles feelings in an old school manner, he has a toughness about him that I think he speaks to in this. But yeah, this is that last little bit of depression, and it's a tough spot because he's trying to stay resilient inside of that, and then it brings us on to the next song. Before we go there, great opener though. I think it sets the tone. I think this video sets the tone for the thought process throughout the compilation, and it's a neat way to start an album.
I completely agree, and I think it is I think it's a beautiful song to open an album and a beautiful message, because that's just very relatable for anybody who's been through situations or depression like this. Not the best way to put all that, but you know what I mean. I think that's a really good way to get that message across, and I think it'll connect with a lot of people. With that being said, you're right. It does go nicely into our next song, which also takes on the water. It's called Saltwater. This is the longest song on the album, and it's still only 4 minutes, but these songs are to the point, I would say. They're to the point. These aren't long form stories. We got it to the point. So this one in particular, I would say this is a song about escape. I would say some people have interpreted possibly suicide, which the visual of it probably doesn't help with that, because we go back to Ed deep in the water in the car. Yeah, I don't know. I think that this one is very interesting. I like that it's just kind of like, was it just a dream is the bridge? Like, was this all just a dream? And based on being in this segment of the album, I'm wondering if he feels like his friend's loss was just a dream. But I think this is kind of just a general message of escape, is what I'm getting from it.
Yeah, I can see where you're going there. Of course, the visual of, being in the car that's sinking brings us to the suicide. It's very hard to discuss this as a visual album without like spoiling the end of it. But this drowning for me was more, and I'll go back to the listening before I saw it. It sounded more like drowning in life. And I took, is this all a dream? Like the life, was it all a dream? It was, before I saw the video for this, it felt a little bit happier coming out of boat than I thought after I watched the video. I say happier in a sense of the escape that you were talking about. I felt that before, but I feel like this is a very, very close razor's edge of whether or not to go through with suicide, which is pretty astounding for him to be able to write this candidly about it and then shoot the video about it.
I mean,
It's really wild. And it might sound like we're assuming a lot here, but I implore everyone listening to check out this 4-part docuseries on Disney Plus, because it's even broken down into love, loss. Oh man, I can't believe I'm forgetting this. Love, loss, something else, and release. Long story short, you get this really, really candid look. I can connect on a bunch of levels, but into an artist, into a successful artist, but for the first time losing, and these trials and tribulations throughout, and a new parent and a new husband. It's he's a 30-year-old guy, he's going through it. And we got to see some really inside stuff. So I say, I think it's pretty wild for him to write so candidly inside of that. I think it was really well done. Really, really well.
And I, even though this is I appreciate that candidness coming from him, because one of my issues with him in the past, I just felt some of his songs, like especially Thinking Out Loud, I just always felt like that song came across as very insincere. It sounded to me like I'm trying to write a hit, I'm trying to write a wedding song. And admittedly, if we're in this industry, of course we're trying to write hits, but I didn't see anything beyond that, and it really bothered me. But I feel like now these walls are really down, and we're just going in there, and I can tell that this is real. And I think we get that throughout the album, which I think is very important. But now we're going to move on to actually the one song that was not specifically written for this album, Eyes Closed. This song was actually first written in 2018 while Ed was on his Divide tour, which is actually the most attended tour of all time. It sold almost 9 million tickets worldwide, which is mind-blowing, but it did do that. So, but he didn't really know what to do with it for a bit, and he did revisit it for the album because it did remind him, just his friend's passing made him think of this song in particular. And it was initially more of a breakup song, but he did repurpose it for this album. And this is also the only song on the album not produced by Aaron Dessner or co-written with him. This one is co-written with Max Martin, Shellback, and Fred again, and those are all pop producers. Max Martin is a titan in pop music. If you don't know the name, you've definitely heard many of his songs, because he's got hits on hits on hits.
That's wild. I never knew this was a shelved song. He tricked me. I say shout out to Dessner, I mean, for even getting it on this album, or just shout out to Ed for getting it on this album, knowing that it wasn't, man, you said the right word there, repurposed. My mind is just blown. You're telling me he didn't write this during this? What a wild thought. What a wild, especially with the video, because the video doesn't, in my opinion, scream to breakup. It's more of it's a loss of a something. He doesn't really say yet or hear. Maybe for the people that know, and I say that in a sense of, if you've watched the docuseries, I'm going to say this a million times, but his lyrics are not very, it's not that they're see-through, but they're very on purpose. We're not wading through symbolism here. We're not doing those dances.
He's not cryptic.
That's for sure. Not in the very least.
He is not cryptic.
Speaking of that, I really loved, and this is a note from my first listen before any of the video stuff, I really love the simplicity on this, at least on the intro to this track. I really love it. And not having listened to the whole album at this point in my notes, this simplicity really speaks to that sadness. So the simpleness of this whole composition here really spoke to the sadness. I love the blue monster of grief and depression in the video. I think that's amazing. I would have to think there's a lot of us that have stood in front of a mirror, you know, in the bar like he does in the video. And dancing with my eyes closed is a really wild way to say that you're trying to get through reality without really dealing with it. I go back to that old school toughness. He says it himself, you know, like, well, I usually push everything down and suppress, but what am I doing there? Because I'm not dealing with it. And that's a struggle that I can really connect with, but I think a lot of people can. So he really gets across, like he does pretty much throughout this album, what he's trying to say here. And I really enjoyed the way he did it.
Yeah, and the visual for this song did enhance it a bit for me because I could definitely relate to that. You're at a bar and everybody around you's dancing, having a good time, just drinking, whatever, and you're just in your own world. You are like figuratively dancing with your eyes closed because you're just so lost in whether it be grief or depression or whatever it is that's got you down. Sometimes those just real problems really bog you down and you feel like you're there, but you're not there. You feel disengaged. And I really felt that. And I think this song is about that. And I really appreciate that there's a song about that because I don't think it always gets touched on a lot, but it's just, I've lived it many nights. I've lived it many nights.
Yeah. It also reminds me of a story he tells early on too about when he was living out in LA and he got the call that his grandfather had passed and he was at a party and he looked around and he literally realized that he had nobody that he could tell this that would actually care. This was before, you know, he started to bring all his friends on tour with him and really keep himself rooted there. But this video reminded me of that anecdote as well.
Now, another cool song idea, though, we talk about being there, nobody cares. Another cool idea was being at a place where people pretend to care.
Heard that.
That's a wild thought I just had.
Agreed.
But anyway, so this was actually released as the lead single for the album. I did not listen to it before this album. I did know about it, but I decided I'm going to wait till the whole album's out before I hear any of it. I just want to go into this completely fresh. And it hasn't really like blown up or anything. Will it? Who knows? I'm not sure I would have. I do like the song. I can see why it was chosen as the lead single. I'm not sure I would have chosen it as the lead single. I just think there's slightly more dynamic stuff here. I'm not sure this would be, if there's going to be a hit off of this album, I'm not sure it's going to be this one, but it is getting some more traction with the release. So I hope it does. I hope it does all right. I don't expect it to go number one, but I hope it does okay because I like this song.
I like this song, but I'm right with you. And it's wild on these new ones to see that we're still on that same thought process. This, for me, is a transitional song. It was a transitional song on the album when I listened to it from a sad bit of the album moving forward into the next track. It's a cool video, but I gotta agree with you and the fact of, really, you guys picked this for the first single on the album? You know, I mean, as a transitional song, you said it perfectly. There's so many more dynamic, hooky, really single worthy songs on this album. This would definitely not have been my first pick for a single.
No, not at all. I think even Boat would have been a better first single, and that's the second single, but that's that's not what they did. But
yeah, that was also the first time that you're going to see me holding back tears because this album fucked me up.
it is one of those albums. It really is. And speaking of songs that fuck you up, I'm getting teary-eyed going into this
don't
one.
Even get me going here.
Life Goes On. Oh boy. So this one was actually solely written by Ed Sheeran, no co-writers. It's the first of 3 songs on here that he wrote by himself. And this is clearly about the loss of his friend. And this has the visual of him being weighed down by an anchor. And he's just really wondering out loud, how does my life go on without you, my friend? After this loss, I don't know what I'm doing here. How does this go on? And like, oh my, yes, absolutely. That's so real. Like, you don't even necessarily predict how a loss will affect you, but like, it can do that to you. And it might not even be the first person you expect losing to do that to you. It might not necessarily be your relative. It could be a really good friend. It just really messes you up and just makes you reevaluate everything in your life at times. I know it has in my experience, certainly. I mean, and one thing that he said in the documentary that I really liked was he said, like, when your friend first dies, you'll have like everybody rally around you at first, like, we're here for you, you can talk to us. He didn't say that, but I knew what he meant. But they'll just assume that you're okay after a few months, even if you're really not. And I just really felt that on another level. He really is acknowledging that it's just not that simple. And yeah, this one cuts deep.
Yeah, just the thought of how do you keep going on with life, period. We're out of the water, we're out of the waves, and just trying to figure out how to keep going. It really is a wild thought that I think that can connect to every single person. It doesn't have to be death. It's whatever that you have to keep going on from. And again, I said it, but that anchor really seems to me, rather than to stop him from going on with life, keeping him grounded rather than running away from the fear of, how am I going to keep going with this? And I really think that speaks to his wife a lot. Maybe it's just me,
That wasn't how I interpreted it.
Yeah.
I thought of the anchor as like the grief is weighing you down, and I'm walking with it, but it's weighing me down.
Oh, walking with it. I like that. I didn't think about walking with it because it is behind him.
It is.
Yeah, that I like that. I like that too. And this art.
Well, I think that was my personal experience because now it's been almost, I'll share an anecdote about my life. A couple of years ago, I had a coworker who I was good friends with who died very unexpectedly, and it ended up being an accidental drug overdose. And I took it really hard. I thought of this person as a really good friend. And even like when I did go out in public, like I just knew everybody saw me and they saw that I was devastated. And that was why I saw it as that, because it's like, yeah, I'm carrying all of this with me, this like dark cloud over my head, because everybody knows that you're not okay. And that's why I just really related to that visual on just another level, because it's like, yes, that's been me before. That was me before.
Yeah. And I don't know if I've ever said it to you, but you carried that well.
Not according to everybody, but
that's what I was just about to say. Sometimes we get lost in what everybody else thinks, and don't worry about that. But I think you carried that very well.
But that's the crazy thing. It's like, I'm kind of grateful that this album exists, because I just feel like this is like, I feel like Ed Sheeran, not even somebody I'm a huge fan of, just he wrote a song that explained me. And it's like, he got this in the way that like most people I know don't even understand. Like, he got me in a way, and I've never met him, probably never will. I'm like, how did he do that? That's a powerful songwriter right there. And I just want to say thank you, Ed Sheeran. I don't know if you're listening to this, but you've really explained something for me and for a lot of other people, I'm sure, too. So it's a very this is a real winning song. I don't see this being a big hit, but it is a stunning song.
Yeah. And also going into this, I had some thoughts of whether he'd be able to hang in the company of this month as such a prolific songwriter. And he definitely, and I'll say thank you for that, he definitely proved me wrong, especially on this track. He's prolific and a very, very, now in my opinion, great songwriter.
Yeah, and he did this all himself. That's a self-written song. And it just goes to show you, sometimes one person just does it best. Unlike having like 10 co-writers on the hit, sometimes just one person does it best.
Ooh, one person does it best, sometimes without even thinking what everybody else thinks.
Exactly.
You didn't even plan on that. And I love that. I love
Well,
that.
it's true that, well, I'm thinking
Yeah.
of his past hits because, okay,
Yeah.
this has been the elephant in the room here. A big part of my ambivalence to Mr. Sheeran was Shape of You. It was an overplayed song, and it's a gross song, frankly, and it's got like free co-writers on it. I mean,
Yeah.
why would you put "And Now My Bed Sheets Smell Like You" in your chorus?
See, there's a romantic part to that.
No,
If
I think it's fucking disgusting, but
you never smell a perfume or cologne or scent of someone in, I don't know. I'm gonna have to disagree on just that line there. I do agree with the fact of this one is all by himself, and a lot of the stuff early on I felt like, yeah, all right, this is a
yeah.
machine crank out.
Well, except his song with Pharrell, Sing. That's a banger.
Yeah, what in the docu-series when you see him perform that live, or get ready to perform it live just with the loop pedal, which I knew he did early on, but I didn't think he still rolled like that.
Yeah.
And to see him do mathematics on stage pretty much alone is mind blowing. I'm getting off the point here, but
It's true, though. It actually is. I didn't know he did all that just himself on stage. And for stadium shows,
yeah, yeah, no, that's something I thought he left back in the clubs or the
yeah,
YouTube videos when I used to see him back in the day.
no way. What a wild thought. But now we are going to switch gears on the album. It's we're gonna switch topics a bit actually for our next song, which is called Dusty. And this song is about, like, he wrote this about being a parent. This song is about spending time with his daughter, and we see a girl play his daughter in the visual for the song. It's not his actual daughter. That girl's way too old in the video, way too old to be his kid, actually. Because she's got to at least be in like what,
9,
third,
10. Yeah, his
yeah,
girls are
third
four
or
and
fourth
two.
grade, and his
Yeah,
kid's like a toddler.
yeah.
So obviously it is not his real kid, but it sums this up, and it's kind of, to him, he said that it was about his daughter kind of like flicking through his records and picking out a random album. And the Dusty referred to is soul singer Dusty Springfield, and in the Apple Music he specifically of course mentioned the Dusty in Memphis album, which interestingly is not the album that was picked out, it looked like, which I thought was really odd. I'm like, why would you pick the album I obviously knew you were referring to? Because that's so often called the classic of hers, like a soul classic. But anyway, that's what he did. And I like the narrative that we're doing here, because in this previous song, he's talking about how does life go on. Here he's saying, family is how life goes on. My children are how life goes on. I need to be a parent and spend time with my children. And he acknowledged this in interviews in the documentary. It's like, I can't fail in front of my kids like this. I have to be present and be a parent. I can't just let depression eat me up and not be a parent. That's not good. And this song really acknowledges that, because he is seeing like a bit of that lighter, and it's like, this is what I have to live for, and it is important even if it's small moments.
Yeah, we see it in the composition of this song too, in my opinion. Now we're not doing just guitar and keys. We don't just have such a simple composition here. And I think it speaks, even especially at 2:35, you get a really percussive, triumphant, in my opinion, change in the mood, where for me, the addition of these other instruments inside the composition really draw a parallel to the happiness of having family around him, and how much it means to him. And then seeing the video for this one, man, you want to talk about tears. For him to have a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old and then do this video with like a 9-year-old, really, and because the video is all like dad moments, it's a really neat look into something that can be quite scary. And I say that because of the things we got to hear from him and his wife about being new parents, about being wow, I didn't think it was going to be this difficult, in the sense of like you being on tour and then him gone for 10 days and being like, man, that was way too long. We got to figure out how to make this thing family friendly. But regardless of tour, just being a new parent is such a wild trip in its own right. It's neat to connect to this song and then connect to this video. It speaks volumes to, again, this whole trip that he's taken us on. It's a really, really neat trip here, and it's perfectly, so far it's perfectly tailored and perfectly placed together. We are really on a ride emotionally throughout this music, and it's set up. This album is solid so far.
Yeah, and what's really interesting actually about the docuseries, his wife, her name is Cherry Seaborn. I think she's such an interesting presence because she knows him better than he knows himself, it seems.
Yeah,
like
they usually do.
but she is really the one who provides the most insight into him, and it's things that like the viewer can kind of see, like, okay, he's not acknowledging this, but like she knows it. Like, it's just so interesting because this is truly the person who has the most insight and awareness into the superstar. So I think that's a really fascinating aspect of the documentary, is seeing who she is and what she does, and like how she's his partner and how she sees him for who he really is.
Yeah, even with the visual of the young daughter, you still get these powerful call outs to his wife throughout this song, even using imagery that he had used prior with the Depression, saying how, you know, the waves are still there, but now he's going at it with a partner. It's or being lost in this stormy ocean before. It's really wild to see his love of family in this song.
Yes, it is. But as we talk about childhood and how it can be great to spend time with dad in this song, we also have to acknowledge what is the end of youth, which is our next track on the album. And this one asks the question, is it the end of youth when pain starts taking over? This is once again about his friend Jamal. And I like this song because it's just another facet of this complicated grieving process. It's like, has my youth ended? And he even said in the documentary, you know, I really feel like my youth ended now, and I'm like, what, 31?
Yeah.
And I've known people who lost their parents when they were 14, and he's like, you had to grow up then? Because I feel like I have to grow up now. I feel like this loss ended my youth. And you lost yours when you were 4. Like, he just doesn't know how that's possible. And that is like it's a good question. And it's like, and everybody's ending of everybody's coming of age is different, I would say. But I mean, a loss can be that for some people. I wouldn't say it is for me the moment I became an adult, but I'm sure it is for some people. Clearly was for Ed in a lot of ways. So I think that's just another facet of grief that he explored on this song, and I like that he did that. And again, a self-written tune.
Do you think he said that quote? Because it blew me away. Now, I loved this song first listen before I watched docuseries and the videos. Do you think that was very awesome production on the video side, or do you think he said that before he wrote this song? Because it was such a profound quote, and it hit me so hard. And then I was like, oh my God, wait a minute. Is he quoting a song, or did he write that song on this quote?
I have no idea. I'm thinking that he had the thought and wrote a song based on it, because that's my guess as to what it is. And the video for this is interesting too, because he is literally surrounded by children in the video playing with sidewalk chalk.
Yeah.
And they're like singing the song with him. So it just, again, it's like just that contrast he's really showing in this visual, which I think is important and again really drives the point home.
I totally agree. We get back to a little bit more of a simpler composition as well. And for me, that harkens back to this sadness that is inside this track. He's dealing inside this track, but it's still a sad track. The line of "we spend our youth with arms and hearts wide open, and then the dark gets in, and that's the end of youth." is, I
Oh,
know that's what we just talked about, but like it's so insane, man. It's such a wild thought. I'll speak from myself, as a Peter Pan-esque syndrome kind of liver. I never really have ever held the age or just age in general in a high regard of judging or living with or just coinciding with people. It's never been a thought of mine, but as I get older and you get into spots like this, I can totally, again, I say this, but I can totally connect with this, man. It's a wild thought. Is youth over? And it's a tough thought. I think I would say for everyone, but for me in general, this one hits home.
yeah, it is a very real question, and it's one many of us ask ourselves, I'm sure, at some point. I know I certainly have. It's kind of like, oh, this is adulthood. That's great. May not be because of this, but for other reasons, it's like, oh, not as easy as it used to be, is it now? But we're going to kind of continue the childhood motif a bit with our next song, Colorblind, which is the last song that he self-composed on the standard edition of the album. And this one, it's a love song, and it shows how like colors can represent love, he talks about, but he also says, let's forget that and like leave the canvas blank or whatever it is. This one, I definitely, I would say this is probably my least favorite here. I think it's just we're not seeing that evolution that we saw earlier. I think with the previous six songs, they really took us to these other places. And then later in the album, too, he has stronger love songs, I think, than this one. I mean, I'm just kind of like, okay, I guess maybe it's supposed to be kind of childish, but I feel like the colors representing love has been used a lot and it's been used better by other artists, frankly. And so it also sounds a bit like a lullaby production wise. And I find that to be a bit of a dirge, not gonna lie. But the video's cool. Lots of Ed getting painted. So that's kind of fun to watch. But this one didn't really do it that well for me.
I was a little bit on the other side of this one. In fact, my first note from just the listen through was "what a love song" with an exclamation point. I'm a romantic like that, and even before I knew the imagery of where this song came from, I thought that treating both you and your partner inside of the song as canvases, or your relationship slash conversations as canvases. I thought it was cool for him to say he likes the nights where they leave the canvas blank. I the lullabyness, I can see you. But for me, the soft piano really matched the conversation because it was a love song to his wife. And then after seeing the docu-series, I mean, they literally painted together.
They
And
did.
she
The
ended up painting,
paintball.
yeah, she ended up painting an abstract that she called Crying Man. And he ended up painting a chaotic wildness that he was like, look, it's my head. Like, look, it's what's in my brain. But it was so cool to see them both connect to each other right away on both of those paintings. So that added a level. This is that constant thought that we were having. Is it the album the same without the videos or without the docuseries? But that definitely added a level to this song for me, knowing where it came from.
For me, it didn't, unfortunately.
Yeah.
I enjoyed seeing them. I enjoyed seeing them paint, but it didn't add to the song for me. I mean, I think the whole visual album aspect, I think it just very much depends on the listeners. Like for some, it enhances it. For others, it takes away from it. For me, I think I'm more of a listener where it can kind of frankly take away from it. Like even great videos for me, I think that the song needs to stand on its own. And I mean, my cousin who raved about Beyonce's Lemonade to me, she said, well, the visual album is a bit much. Just listen to it. I thought, oh, everybody told me it was amazing. So I'm like, okay.
Nerd.
And I think I'm more that kind of listener. When it comes to, I think the song needs to stand on its own and the visual can enhance it, but the song's gotta be there.
I can see where you're coming from.
But that is just me. And Now we're going to move on to another song about relationships, but a different facet of them. This one is Curtains. I took this as a song about how his wife got him to open up because he admitted, like, I just shove it down and work all the time. He definitely is a workaholic. It looks like in the docu-series, he does not stop, this man. And this one, when I first heard it, I really didn't like it a lot. I just felt like it was a bit too chaotic and cluttered. But it's grown on me a bit, actually. With each repeated listen, it has grown on me. And the visual for this one, I really don't have a lot to say about. I don't know if you do, but I really don't. This is the one I could actually see crossing over to like top 40 a bit. Because it has a monster hook to it, like you would expect from Sheeran. And this one of the Dessner produced songs here, this definitely is the most radio friendly. And that's why it's definitely not my favorite on the album, but I'm kind of surprised this wasn't the lead single.
Oh, I gotta number them all. I'm totally agree with you on I can't see this not being the lead single. I also first listened through this one, I was mad at because it didn't fit for me. In fact, I was like, why are we're doing this wild take and all of a sudden you're going to stick a pop song in the middle of this? But then I go and watch the docu-series. For the visualization on this, not too much. It's cool. It lends itself, I guess, but it doesn't really add. But knowing the stuff that his wife was saying about like just him being a workaholic, like you said, and then him being like, yeah, there was a point, I'm really tight with my security, man. I see him more than I see my wife. He was at my wedding, he was here, he was there, but he even says, there was a time where I was hiding. I was very, very worried about people being like, oh, taking a picture and like he's here and getting swamped. They even have that anecdote of them trying to have a nice romantic row or in Central Park and then all of a sudden being swarmed by boats and people taking pictures. So it wasn't until then when I went back and listened that, and again, it's my opinion, but I think that I understood where Dessner / Sheeran were going with this, because I really feel like the poppiness of this track harkens back to an early Sheeran, and in that sense really elevates the narrative of you found me in my hiding place and you are convincing me to pull the curtains back and let the light shine in, which I like. But that being said, again, without the docuseries and the visualization, this one totally my least favorite on the album. I was so like, get out of here with this, man. Like, it just doesn't belong. So it's a tough one. It's a tough one for me. It has grown on me, like you said, because of those levels. But if I take it just on first listen, this one was not for me at all.
Yep, but that's why you sometimes gotta listen to it more than once, folks. So, what I will say is I actually, when it comes to the single worthiness of this, I wouldn't be surprised if it was a single. And I will say the radio is definitely Ed Sheeran's friend, because they have drilled some of his songs into our heads for sure. And they might with this one, who knows?
It sounds stingy, but I hope it doesn't hit for the wrong reasons. Like, yeah, it's got a hook, but like, this is a powerful song. It's very stingy, selfish of me to say that.
I mean, I think it would be nice for some people to see that Ed might do something they didn't expect, personally, because he hasn't gotten a lot, especially recently with that copyright lawsuit that he threatened to quit music over. There were some people saying, good, do it, because we don't like you. And maybe
and
some
he
of those,
won that.
He did win, and as he should have, because no thinking out loud does not sound like let's get it on. Come on.
That was silly from the get-go for me. If anybody doesn't follow where we're going, he got hit up on a copyright lawsuit
by the estate of Marvin Gaye, who are pretty lawsuit happy.
Yeah, I don't think Marvin Gaye would have let that go down. But
hell no. Marvin Gaye was a writer. He would not have let that happen. No way. But sadly, he is not here with us to see all that happened. He didn't get to see his legacy. That is a tragedy to maybe be discussed another day if we discuss Marvin Gaye on here.
Yeah. Yep, that's true.
But back to Ed Sheeran. Our next song is Borderline. Great song title. I can't think of a bad song called Borderline. I've heard a few called that. I can't think of a bad one. So that's a good sign. And this one is about feeling stuck on the healing journey. Like I just feel like I'm on the borderline, and this one might be the most sonically the most folklore-esque track here to me. This one is so that Dessner piano bass, it so reminds me of Taylor's album so much, but in a good way, because I'm not going to complain about anything sounding like folklore. But I have to say, his vocal here is, I actually think, quite beautiful. He uses his falsetto very effectively, and it just works really well against this backdrop.
I, for the first listen, at least, was convinced for a second that wasn't him singing at the start, because that falsetto was something that I wasn't accustomed to hearing him really hit like that. But it is very beautiful. It is very well done. That Dessner piano, that composition is sick. That's one, he'll say, I don't know if they're going to be hits, but I feel like if I was recording that one, I'd be like, we got this one. This really, the way this song is composed, it's such a neat arrangement for that piano all the way through this. You get into the visualization and that borderline of being stuck in the healing process, and they do him being see-through. You can see a little bit of him, but not much. You can see through him. I thought that was cool, a cool way to show trying to be all the way in the moment, but still not being officially, because you're stuck in thoughts of everything else. But musically, sonically, this is such a cool piece. I love it.
Totally agreed. But I have to say this. If ever you are feeling in a space like this, you know what can help get you out? Listening to Madonna's 80s classic hit Borderline. I had to say that.
There you go.
Because it was the elephant in the room. When I hear the word borderline, you gotta think of the Madonna classic, but this is as far from that as you can get. So
that's true.
But now we are moving on into another contemplative track. This is a very contemplative album. We are getting all the doubts here. I feel like this is his like autopsy album, as Taylor Swift would say. She felt like her albums were emotional autopsies. This is his emotional autopsy. We're getting it all here.
We really do.
This song is called Spark, and he described it as a song where you throw in everything into the fire and hope that the spark is still there. And this is definitely about like the doubts that he faces in his marriage, and he definitely had got them dealt to him recently, because it's like, oh my goodness, you have cancer and you're pregnant. Like that's a double hurdle for a couple to go through. That's really tough, even if you have as much money as Ed Sheeran does. And so he just is hoping that the love survives, which is the spark. And I think that's a really beautiful message. And again, I like that this shows an evolution, because his hit love songs, Thinking Out Loud and Perfect, those are Hallmark cards. This is real. I don't want to hear the Hallmark card. I want reality. And he gave that to us here, and I really appreciate that. And but his optimism that love will win is still present in the song. And that's part of who he is. I'm not going to take that away from him. But yeah, I like that we just acknowledge some deeper truths of relationships here, and that it's not all sunshine, rainbows, and lollipops.
Yeah, I love the way this song is built again musically. Dessner, shout out to both you and Sheeran again on this one. The strings, I really love the use of the strings in this song. This one has a little bit of parenthood on it too. I took this one a little bit more so as the fire was this marriage. I'll speak, these are the ways that it connected to me, but I've always thought about marriage as a constant, something that we didn't jump into without thought. And because of that, it will always be there like a fire until it goes out. And for me, not to sound too morbid, but that would mean the end of life. So the sparks for this one, to me, ended up being a shout out to the kids of flying off. And again, not in a morbid sense, because it's hope the sparks survive, but more of a, in parenthood, you can, or I have come to feel that, we got this fire thing, we got that on lock. The new challenge is hoping that these sparks survive. And I dug that. This song, whether that's the case or not, this song really, like you said, takes us away from a Hallmark setting and really, truly lays it on the line. And this album, period, lays it on the line. But this song really does. And you spoke to it a little bit before, but I think Curtains, maybe Colorblind, actually, is our step forward, our steps as collective listeners, collective participants in this trip that Ed Sheeran and Aaron Dessner are taking us through. I see that as us going towards a happier sense, and we start to build on that. And Sparks really does embody that for me. We've come through Colorblind into Curtains, which, the curtains are pulled back, that love is there. Borderline, we're still in a place of healing, and now we're really just laying it out on the line as far as marriage and love goes. I think all of these have a happier tone than we saw in the depression / grieving first half of this album.
Yes, like there is definitely a bit more optimism in this section of it, because this is more so about his family, the second half of the album, I would say, practically. But the difficulties aren't over, and we are going to take that even more head on in our next song, which is Vega. So this doesn't refer to like the Chevrolet Vega, the vintage car. No. This refers to Vega is the brightest star in the constellation Lyra. It's one of the brightest stars in the universe. I think it's the 5th brightest that I read. And in this one, he flat says, like, yeah, we were dealt with a cancer diagnosis, and they'll get through it, but it's gonna hurt. He says that up front pretty much in this song, but that leads us to our chorus. It's like, we were meant to be stars, but it still burns like hell to be Vega, which means we're a bright star, but bright stars burn. And wow, what a thing. I never would have expected Ed Sheeran to go into such specific astronomy here. I really appreciate that. Wow, I just kind of floored by this song. I wasn't expecting it at all in the best way possible. And most songs about stars, they don't name specific stars. I just love that he showed off his nerdiness a bit here, I feel like.
I hope I can blow your mind a little bit here. I don't really get to ever really blow your mind, I think. Oh. But I didn't know. So you started off with the joke of it's not the Chevrolet or the car, and Vega, the only Vega I knew was a Street Fighter character. So I dug this song, right? But I wanted to know where he was coming from, because at first I really did. I felt like he was talking about marriage, but it wasn't hitting correctly for me when he said it burns like hell to be Vega. And now you ready for this? Because I thought you were going there. I thought I couldn't get one that you hadn't thought of, but it's one of the brightest stars in the constellation of Lyra, Lyra. His first daughter's name is Lyra. So, I got to hold the tears back here. So I think he's really talking here about being the brightest star in his daughter's life, which is fucking heavy, right? And it burns like hell. Fuck. I'm probably going to take another take on this one. But yeah, so he's the brightest star in his daughter's life. And it's that new challenge that I think he's speaking of here, and how hard it is, and it burns like hell. God damn you, Ed Sheeran.
Seriously, man, you. Oh, I didn't know he had this in him, but
Yeah, so I really think this one's a shout out to his daughter.
oh, it definitely is. Now that you've said that, it definitely is. Wow, and yeah, we've been through all these emotions, and the album's not even over.
Right?
What? Oh man. Oh no. No, he's going to just keep taking us on this spiral he's on with our next song, which is Sycamore. And yep, this one's about his wife's cancer. He says, wow, I'm worried about my lover and our child. And
Yeah.
he's just nervous as anything. And in this one, he uses the sycamore tree to represent different facets of the situation, which I think is pretty cool. And again, this is this like Spark, it's a song that really showcases anxiety, but this specific anxiety he's having, and how, like, I do think our love will survive. I do think we'll get through this, but it's gonna be rough. And again, just going into that poetic sense, it's another beautifully done song in my opinion. And I like the visual for this one in this too. Like, he literally just has water pouring out of his chest.
Yeah.
It's wild.
Yeah, he's literally pouring his heart out here. And with the video, with the visualization. He's the dad, he's the tree, he's this strong tree. He uses a couple different ones, like you said, he's blocking the sun out. But this one really is about just being the patriarch. Something we didn't touch on, and he says it in so many words in this song, and you'll see it in the docuseries. They not only had diagnosed his wife with cancer while she was pregnant, and like Charlie had said before, they at first glance, at first diagnosis, they thought that they were going to have to do something about it before the baby was born. But on top of that, they literally, from their words, had to wait a month for the docs to go through and try to figure things out. I'll paraphrase, but Ed was like, we were walking aimlessly around London for a month. Like, what do you do? What are we going to do? And silver lining here, they found out that the operation the tumor was not as bad as they thought, and they got to have surgery after the baby was born. But he talks about that in here. Also, there's a line in here, planting roots for them just to be ripped up. That's, we don't see it a lot from him here, but that's that symbolism of that cancer too. Like how scary it would have been, or how scary it was inside of another life being inside of your wife, and inside, I'll keep saying inside, this giant ball, this snowball of emotions, but inside of this cancer diagnosis. Yeah, this one hits. It's a good singer-songwriter album when you don't hear me just dissecting the music. The music's great here. Ed Sheeran can play his butt off. While I'm saying that, I have the thought in my head, after seeing Mathematics Tour and how solo he was, I think I have to say good luck to you, Mr. Sheeran, on your next. If you tour for this album, I don't know if you're going to be able to be on stage solo for this one. There's some back in here, and Dessner has done a lot of piano work. Not that Sheeran can't pull it off, but there's a lot of work on this album. A lot of great music.
He's playing the whole album live at some venues this year.
By himself?
I mean, I don't know if he has a band with him or not, but he's going on a tour for it. It's like in between his Mathematics Stadium dates, he's doing small theaters and playing this whole album and some of his hits.
I don't think I would have ever thought I'd say this out loud, but I wouldn't mind seeing that show.
Oh, neither would I. I think it's all sold out, but I would love to see it, actually. After this, because woo!
Yeah, but I love this song too, musically. It's well done, man.
Yeah, but a true musical winner on the album for me is the track number 13, which is the penultimate track, at least of the standard edition, which is No Strings. And I would say this is the true love song of the album. This does not as much reference the cancer. This is about how their love is really unconditional. And this one, it really didn't stick out to me a whole lot at first. I think it just didn't. It was just kind of there, but it's one that grows on you, and it's a stunning piano arrangement here. That's really, once it sinks in, you can't forget it. It is mind-blowing. And again, I think this song is truly from the heart, even more so than just like the Hallmark card songs of the past. Like, I don't think this is him trying to write a hit that can get played at weddings. You could play this at a wedding. It would be beautiful, but I didn't get that from this song, and that's why I connected it with it a bit more. And then the visual for it was also really interesting because you see him just climbing this ladder and it keeps breaking on him, and then he fails to get off the beach. And just kind of a wrap up of the storyline of where he's been set this whole time. But just I think this is a perfect second to last song on the album, I have to say.
I think not only is it a perfect second to last song, but it is a perfect next song from Sycamore. Sycamore into No Strings. It's tough to think of a better combo as far as really pouring your heart out love songs on both sides of the spectrum go. You've already touched musically on this one. It kills. I think this could be a single off the album. That's just me. Musically, I think it sticks. Yeah, I think it sticks like that. But it's a no symbolism, straightforward love song, a love song for not only his wife, but a love song for their marriage and a love song for their love, which I think is the most, not so much interesting, but the really the coolest part of this song for me is that it's a love song to the love that he shares with his wife. Such a well, you talk about, it growing on you, but this is another one again after the docuseries. They're such a unique couple in the fact of where they came from. Even though they knew each other at a younger age, it almost seems like they weren't meant for each other, when in fact by the end of the docuseries that they are totally meant for each other. It's a beautiful one. Definitely such a cool song. I can go on and on. I'm sorry. That docuseries was really neat. This album has hit me in so many different ways. But this song, period, what a great way to set up the end of this album.
Yes, if you have Disney Plus, definitely watch it.
For real.
Definitely worth. And it's like 2 hours only. It's a great way to spend a couple hours.
Oh yeah, it's broken up into 4 half-an-hour pieces. It's an easy watch, but a really awesome one.
Yes, it is. And now we are at the end of at least the standard edition, because there's 2 editions of this album with bonus tracks, but the regular edition of this album ends with The Hills of Abernathy, which was co-written with Foy Vance, another singer-songwriter. And for those who don't know, Abernathy is a small town in Scotland. And I've read a couple of places that this was actually written in 2012, which kind of does in a way make sense, because I guess I could see this going on an album with the A-Team. Not that I know that whole album, but I can kind of see that. But I like that they've repurposed it here. I think this is just again another good love song, but we just take this beautiful scenery of the Hills of Abernathy and apply it to that. And I also think that it's a smart closer because it does signify how we're subtracting and going back to those acoustic singer-songwriter roots and taking out all the pop excess, I guess you could say, and really just going back to basics a bit. And that, in that sense, I think it's a smart closer. And I also think it's a beautifully written song.
Yep. First listen through, I thought this was a cover of a traditional Scottish hymn. And I I thought that was a bit contrived. I didn't dig it. And it gave me a really bad taste for the song and a really bad taste for it as a closer. Then I do my research, as we always do, and I learn a lot more about Ed Sheeran, and I lose this crazy judgmental disposition that I had on him as just a poppy machine cranked out artist. And it's such a fitting ending for this song, even for this album, even without the visualization. It's a fitting end to this album. With the visualization, he's now put all of the beach and the waves and the salt water behind him, and he's finding literal solace to the point of just sinking in and finding true solace in the hills, in the earth, and the earth being the hills of Abernathy. And it's a beautiful song. It almost is a cappella, but it's such a really neat way to end this album. And I had such a dirty disposition to it in first listen, and I'm so glad I got to experience this album in these other ways, because I don't think it would have touched me the way that it did without the knowledge of him and his life so far.
Yeah, but I am going to say this. There is having this as the closer was a really obvious folklore parallel for me.
Oh, heard that. Whoa, I said traditional Scottish theme, and I wasn't even thinking the folklore of a certain place, and then us having a folklore. Wow, man.
No, I'm not even kidding, because the last song on that album's The Lakes.
Oh, yeah, I didn't even think about that. Wow, man.
So I'm like, I think I get where we're coming from here, and it's still a beautiful song, but it's like, I think I know what you're doing there a bit.
Yeah, Dessner has maybe we're getting his plan here.
Yeah.
But yeah, I like what he does.
So do I, but yeah, that ends the standard edition of the album. And when I streamed it, it automatically went into the deluxe edition. Did you have a lot to say about those songs too?
A little bit. For me, Stoned, I think I would have loved to see where it was actually going to be inside this album. I think that Stoned is the one that really felt like it could have fit there. I can see it not going in there because it might have been a little bit of redundancy.
I would agree.
I don't think I could take anything out of that part of the album and put Stoned in, but it's a cool one. I didn't dig Wildflower. It didn't feel cohesive to the album, and just it wasn't for me.
Yeah. I kind of wish that one was just like a Tom Petty cover of Wildflowers. That would have been better.
Heard, yeah. But yeah, Stoned was the only one that stood out of the four for me that I was like, I think this one could have really fit.
Yeah, the last two songs I did, Toughest and Moving, I enjoyed them, but I don't think they fit with the album, which is why they're bonus tracks. Toughest, I felt like was kind of like a first draft of Sycamore.
Heard.
A bit more on the nose with it all, but I have to say it's got a monster hook to it. Like, I could definitely see a stadium sing along to that one.
That's true.
But I think it just would have, I don't think it was the most right for this album. I think it would have fit better on one of his more pop albums, I would think. Because it definitely has that bombast to it, but I definitely see where it was coming from, and I do enjoy it. And Moving is kind of like a tongue-in-cheek kind of breakup song that again doesn't fit with the album at all, but I enjoyed it. I thought it was a cute tune, and just decent closer for the deluxe edition, but not as ultimate as the Hills of Abernathy, that's for sure.
Yeah, no. Did you by any chance get to listen to the vinyl?
No, I did not. I haven't seen those available on streaming, those other songs. I actually did order a vinyl of it, but the version I got was actually just the 14 tracks.
Gotcha.
I got it from Urban Outfitters because I had a coupon. So I'm happy to have the 14 tracks, admittedly. I'm happy to have those.
Most definitely. The only reason I ask, the only reason I ask is because I saw that it had a reprise of Boat, and I was just curious how that was handled.
Yeah, I am too, but I don't have it. I don't know if it'll be put out on streaming or not. That's to be determined. But yeah, there we have Subtract, the latest from Ed Sheeran, the end of his math albums. Wow. I
Yeah.
guess it really is the end of an era for Ed Sheeran. So I guess we'll see what he does after this. But in the meantime, we've got this beautiful album about love and loss from Mr. Sheeran. What is your grade for the album?
Oh man, this one was not hard for me to grade. I went through it multiple times and I really enjoyed everything. I have to say that this grading comes with the docuseries and the visual album parts combined for me, but this album hits me every which way from Sunday on all the feels. As a musician, as a guitar player, as someone who used to sit and strum by themselves, it is really empowering to see Ed Sheeran come all the way back around and in adulthood, in parenthood, inside of marriage and inside of life, really give us this heartfelt, straight up, like you said, autopsy of his psyche right here. And for that, I give this an A.
I'm going to go in just a bit lower than you. This is an A minus for me. It's just because I agree with everything that you said. I do still hear elements of like that Ed that's been around because that is the artist that we have here. And I mean, some of it's not stuff that I love about him, and I still hear that seeping through a bit, but overall, this is a really strong album and a real evolution for him. And I think that him working with Aaron Dessner was an incredible idea, and they made some beautiful, beautiful music together. And I'm just so glad that this album exists, frankly, because I really think that it might sound like it's very specific to Ed, but really this is relatable to everybody in some way. And I think that's so important. And I really feel like the superstar was humanized and we saw a different side of him. And for that, I'm just happy to have this album out there. And I hope that a lot of people discover it and enjoy it.
Yeah, man. Yeah, man.
What is your favorite song on the album?
I don't even know if I can pick. In all honesty, I tried so hard. I Sparks, Vega, Sycamore, No Strings all together, but Vega is Vega. Vega's my favorite song on this album. It just in a father to daughter type of sense. It hit me hard. It hit me, and now it's stuck with me.
I got to go with the one that hit me the most. Life Goes On.
Heard.
What a devastator, but I will give it this, though. I'm glad that it's not like devastating to the point where like I think it's beautiful, but I don't ever want to listen to it. Like there's some songs out there, they're very relatable, but it's like, oh, that's so depressing. I can't listen to that all the time. This one can still fit into like a playlist. It's not like you're gonna put on like Neil Young's The Needle and the Damage Done. That's just too depressing to put in a playlist. But this isn't, and I appreciate that we have a middle ground. So thank you for that, Ed, because it's either Def songs, they're either over the top schmaltz, which has its place at times, or they're that devastating, like The Needle and the Damage Done. But
heard that.
I'm glad we have a middle ground there with this album and that song in particular. So
thank you.
Have it.
Yeah, thank you, Ed.
Yes. Who knew? I never thought I would buy an Ed Sheeran album on vinyl, but here we are. I had to do it.
This is one of them time machines where if I had a time machine, I go back and young me is like, what are you talking about? Ed Sheeran. Like, you're old and soft, old man. Go back to the future. But he really got me on this one.
Yeah. Now I think I might have to go back and listen to that first album if that's more acoustic based.
I heard that.
I'm intrigued now, actually. It's like, wow, I just didn't know all this was there. But we're not going to stay in Sheeran land. We are discussing the album that got us here to discuss this to begin with. Yes, next week we will be discussing Folklore, because I am going to the Eras tour this weekend. Definitely to the Saturday show. The Friday show I might be doing what the TikTok Swifties are doing and watch it from the parking lot.
There you
Because
go.
that is happening. Because I cannot pay over $1,000 for a concert ticket. I just can't do it. But I'm very excited. It's going to be a really fun week, and I'll be posting a lot about it. I'll even put some of it onto our accounts, which you should follow at Turntables Tea on Twitter, at Turntables and Tea Podcast on Facebook and Instagram. Folklore is a good pick for it because her folklore segment of the show is 7 songs long, so there's going to be plenty to discuss with the tour added in addition to the album itself. There's a lot to discuss with folklore, but yeah, very excited for that. It's one of my favorites, if I haven't already made that clear. But yeah, in the meantime, of course, follow us and also subscribe to us wherever you're listening, whether it be Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon, Audible, iHeartRadio. We are on all of those platforms. And this week, we have a poll attached to this episode where you can decide which of one of 4 albums that influenced Taylor Swift's folklore in some way you want to hear covered. And those albums that we have chosen for you to decide from are Radiohead's In Rainbows. You might be shocked to hear that if you've been listening to us for a while, but that is a poll option. Bob Dylan's The Freewheelin' Bob Dylan, Bon Iver's self-titled album Bon Iver, and the Chicks, formerly known as the Dixie Chicks, and their album Home. They all played a part in folklore somehow, which we'll be mentioning in that episode. One's very obvious because the artist is featured on the album, but we're not there yet. Stay tuned for folklore and some, hopefully some fun Eras tour stories too. And please be sure to vote in our poll, which I'll also be posting on our Twitter and Instagram pages very shortly. So hopefully you all can get to that and help us make those hard decisions.
Oh, yeah.
All right. But yes, in the meantime, just put on your cardigans and wait for our next episode.
Peace.